Headliner Nation, what's going on? Kyle with the Fantasy Headliners back with another episode for you. And this one, it's going to be a quickie, but a goodie. We're not going to dive nearly in depth as we do with some of our other episodes for this one. So if you're new to the Fantasy Headliners, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and check out all of our other content after this video is done. Because for this video, I wanted to switch it up a little bit, and I want to talk about all 32 teams. But I'm going to talk about one player from each team that may be undervalued here in 2020. Now, for all of these guys, we might not add any of them in our drafts, but what we will want to do is at least have them on our radar, put them on our watch list, because at some point this season, whether it be due to ineffectiveness, injuries, illness, it doesn't matter, they could end up making a leap up the depth chart, or they could be utilized more often by their team. So for whatever reason, I have got 32 guys that, even though they don't have a ton of value right now, they could help you out at some point here in 2020. So let's go ahead and jump into all the action right away. And let's talk about my first player for the Arizona Cardinals, Mr. Larry Fitzgerald, the future Hall of Famer. Yeah, it sounds like he's got enough left in the tank for one more season. Larry Fitzgerald is a guy that, if he plays in the slot this year and is the wide receiver too, with DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk on the outside, he could see 80 to 90 targets, and he could approach around 900 receiving yards. If he can score some touchdowns, he should give you good value that he could become a weekly flex play. Keep in mind that defense, even though they have tried to step it up and upgrade the defense a little bit, it still isn't that great. They might have to throw it quite a bit, and if they do, Larry Fitzgerald should be a key cog in that lineup. Brian Hill from the Atlanta Falcons is another one I want to bring up because of Todd Gurley. We know that knee could cause some problems. I believe in Todd Gurley this year. However, you still have to be cautious. If you draft Todd Gurley, you have to keep an eye on Brian Hill. Yeah, you might have a little bit of a problem with Ito Smith, as we like to say, an Ito bit of a problem. But Brian Hill, I believe, will truly be that running back too, and a guy that they could use also in a little bit of a receiving role if that's what they need to do to get Todd Gurley off the field a little bit each game. Brian Hill, I think, will be that guy, and if Todd Gurley were to miss any time, I think Brian Hill is the one that they give the most carries to. Miles Boykin from the Baltimore Ravens. Miles Boykin was basically forgot about last season because of Hollywood Brown. Now, Marquise Brown dealt with an injury last year, ended up coming out of the offseason healthy now at this point. He had the offseason surgery to have that pin in his foot removed. He should be good to go. However, they're going to need somebody else to step up. They're going to have a wide receiver too. Maybe they decide to run the ball a little bit less and throw a little bit more. Somebody is going to have to step up other than Mark Andrews and Hollywood Brown. What if Hollywood Brown misses some time? What if he is still having issues with that foot? What if he has some up and down, some peaks and valleys? Miles Boykin has been in the offense already for a full year. He's got a good grasp on it. He's going to know what to do. He could be that wide receiver too. Dawson Knox from the Buffalo Bills. I like Dawson Knox. He is an athletic tight end that can make plays after the catch. And the biggest thing with Dawson Knox this year is he's got two high-end wide receivers on the outside that can pull defenses down the field. That could leave him a lot of room in the middle of the defense to roam around in the middle of the field, just behind those linebackers. And because he is athletic enough to make plays after the catch, he could be a guy that Josh Allen targets on those intermediate routes quite often. It's one of the reasons why we like Cole Beasley this year as well. But Dawson Knox could be a weekly streamer for those of you that decide to weigh on drafting tight ends. Another tight end to bring up, Ian Thomas from the Carolina Panthers. Greg Olsen is gone. They're going to have somebody step up in that role. To me, it is Ian Thomas. Yes, they have a lot of receiving options there, especially Christian McCaffrey in the backfield. DJ Moore. They brought in Robbie Anderson. You still have Curtis Samuel there. However, they're going to need somebody to step up at tight end. And in the past, and I talk about this in a video that's coming out here in a couple of days, Ian Thomas, I think, could benefit from Teddy Bridgewater if Teddy Bridgewater does not end up pushing the ball down the field like some people think. So keep an eye on Ian Thomas. Again, another guy that we could potentially stream this year. How quickly we forget about John Ross. Now, I have never been the biggest John Ross supporter. He is a guy that is, to me, a little bit of a one-trick pony. I don't believe he is somebody that runs the best routes, the crispest routes. I believe he is one of those guys that is a straight line, pull the defense down the field, burner, okay? He's that big play threat. However, if AJ Green isn't fully healthy, if he misses some more time, whatever it may be, even with the added receiving options there, John Ross is the big play guy. That's the one thing that he kind of has over everybody else. He is the one true deep threat. Yeah, Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins could do that, but John Ross is significantly faster and runs those routes a little bit better. So don't forget about him. He could be a guy that in a pinch you need this year, you could play him at the flex if he's playing a defense that is prone to giving up big plays. Anthony Miller, people last year also forget that at one point in time through like a 4-game stretch, he was a wide receiver 1. He was getting a ton of targets. He was getting a ton of volume. The dude looked good. Anthony Miller was a guy that looked like a wide receiver 2. My hope is they continue to play him in the slot. Teams continue to focus on Allen Robinson. They get the run game going a little bit more this year. And if they do, that could help out Anthony Miller quite a bit. He's going to be a PPR monster this year. Rashard Higgins from the Cleveland Browns. He's a guy with Jarvis Landry on the mend after offseason surgery. If Landry were to miss any time, Rashard Higgins becomes the wide receiver 2 in that offense. And when you've got Odell Beckham Jr. on the other side, you've got receiving options like Kareem Hunt, David Njoku, Austin Hooper. Rashard Higgins is going to be a guy that could be in a lot of one-on-one coverage, and he has a great athletic profile. He can win on his routes. He could be a guy, again, in a pinch, if there's an injury in Cleveland, you could use him as a flex play against weak defenses. Tony Pollard might be one of my biggest handcuffs to own this year. Tony Pollard is a special athlete, a very gifted football player, but he's hidden behind Zeke Elliott right now. If anything were to happen to Elliott, Tony Pollard is the guy that you're going to want to be holding on to and get your hands on immediately, because if he were to get a significant amount of workload where he could get double-digit touches every single week, he is absolutely, in PPR leagues, a huge flex play. Defense, special teams from Denver. That's odd. We don't talk a lot about them on our videos here at the Fantasy Headliners. However, with the defense and special teams, I do like the Denver Broncos this year because Bradley Chubb is back. He is back, healthy, ready to go. Von Miller there, obviously. And they're going to play in a division that throws the ball quite a bit. And with as good as their offense could be, teams will be throwing against them. More opportunities for interceptions. They could give up quite a bit of yards and points, but I think they can offset that with a lot of the sacks and turnovers they could create. Danny Amendola from the Detroit Lions. He is a guy that in PPR leagues you could use on a weekly basis as a flex play depending on what the Lions' schedule is. Now, if they're facing a team that can give up a lot of points and a lot of touches and a lot of receiving yards to slot wide receivers, Danny Amendola is a guy to keep an eye on. They have big-time playmaking weapons with Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones down the field. And you add in T.J. Hockenson and DeAndre Swift, yeah, Danny Amendola might be the 5th option on that team, but he will be the guy that is least covered on that team as well. If that happens, and he can get anywhere from 5 to 6 receptions in a week, he should be more than capable of helping you on some bye-week fill-ins. And if for any reason, again, they have some injuries, Danny Amendola could help step up. They brought him back for a specific reason. That is to play in the slot. Jace Sternberger from the Green Bay Packers. Jimmy Graham is gone. Jace Sternberger steps in. And the biggest thing about them, they don't have a ton of established receiving options. You have Devontae Adams. You have Aaron Jones. That's about it. The other guys on the team are guys that can be inconsistent, that they've had problems with. They didn't upgrade the position at all this year because Devin, #NeverFunchess, is not considered an upgrade. Even if he does score some touchdowns, Jace Sternberger could be a guy that steps up and starts making some plays for the Green Bay Packers. Duke Johnson, also one of my top handcuffs to own this year. People hate on Duke Johnson, but if this guy were to get 200-plus touches in a season, he is a flex play every single week, half PPR or PPR. We saw last year how much Bill O'Brien commits to one running back. That was Carlos Hyde. If anything happens to David Johnson, Duke Johnson steps in as that guy, and he becomes an absolute must-own, must-start every single week. Duke Johnson, when he touches the football, he gets yards, he gets points, and he does it quite often. Check those stats. I've talked about him in some of our other videos. I really wish somebody somewhere would give Duke Johnson a full workload. Nyheim Hines from the Indianapolis Colts, the reason I've got him is because I would like them to use him in the slot this year. They don't have an established slot wide receiver. Yeah, Zach Pascal is still there. You've got T.Y. Hilton. Paris Campbell's coming back. Michael Pittman is there after the draft. But Nyheim Hines was a slot wide receiver in college as well as a running back. Coming out of his draft, he was considered to be one of the best route running backs in the draft because of how advanced and how developed his route tree is. He can run all the routes. He can run them from everywhere on the field. If they can put him in the slot, Phillip Rivers could be looking his way quite often, and he would be a good play in PPR leagues. Chris Thompson is also a PPR guy that you want to keep an eye on because former coach Jay Gruden, who used him quite often while they were in Washington together, is now the offensive coordinator there in Jacksonville. How long is he the offensive coordinator for? I don't know. I'm not going to talk about all of that came out about Washington. We'll let that play out and be handled appropriately. But for now, this is what I know. Jay Gruden's the offensive coordinator. He loves him some Chris Thompson. I expect Chris Thompson to cut into quite a bit of those targets that we saw Leonard Fournette get last year. Mecole Hardman from the Kansas City Chiefs. He is a big-time playmaker. This guy on a touchdown per touch basis last year was one of the best in the NFL, if not the best, especially at wide receiver. The dude, when he touches the football, he can take it to the house at any point. Hopefully they give him a little bit more of an expanded role this year, and if they do, big-time playmaker, he's going to score some touchdowns. Mike Williams from the Los Angeles Chargers. I don't know if you know this, but Mike Williams had over 1,000 yards last year. Yeah, might be hard to believe, but he had over 1,000 yards last year. He was one of two players with less than 60 receptions and more than 1,000 yards. The other one, A.J. Brown, and I'll be talking about those two again on a video here coming up soon. But because of that, I'm not afraid of Tyrod Taylor. I am not. Tyrod Taylor, when he was in Buffalo, could go down the field with the best of them. If he does it again, Mike Williams, if he scores some touchdowns, the dude jumps back. He comes back after being a breakout candidate last season. Gerald Everett from the LA Rams. Now, everybody is all over Tyler Higbee, and I get it. I understand. Recency bias tells us Tyler Higbee is the best tight end on that team, but not so fast. Gerald Everett is actually the best tight end on that team. He has the athletic profile. He has the college. He was a beast in college. The dude put together some spectacular numbers, and he was the starting tight end last year. He was on the field more than Tyler Higbee. He got hurt, though. Tyler Higbee took over, and they rode the hot hand. If they run more 12 personnel with more two tight ends on the field this year, Gerald Everett is the guy that could get open more often and be available more often than what Tyler Higbee could. Do not give up on Gerald Everett. Keep your eye on him. Hunter Renfrow, now that they've got options there, Henry Ruggs on the outside. We've got Bryan Edwards, who I really, really like. Tyrell Williams healthy. Hunter Renfrow is a guy that could eat over the middle of the field and be a true PPR threat every single week. The guy could see 70 to 80 targets this year easily because people are going to be so worried about all the other weapons on that offense and because of Josh Jacobs running the football. Linebackers play a little bit closer to the line. Defensive backs play a little bit further down the field to keep up with the speed. Hunter Renfrow, open, always in the middle of the field. Matt Brieda. I love Jordan Howard. I think Jordan Howard is a guy that I want in all of my leagues this year. I think he is going to do a fine job in Miami. But Matt Brieda is a bigger playmaker and a more dynamic athlete. I've got nothing against Jordan Howard. I just want you to keep an eye on Matt Brieda because if they end up playing from behind quite often and are playing catch-up, Matt Brieda is the guy that could see a little bit more of that negative game script role than what Jordan Howard would. Jordan Howard's going to score some touchdowns, but Matt Brieda could get you some receptions and some receiving yards. Irv Smith Jr., they're going to run some more 12 personnel this year. Minnesota as well. He is a better route runner. He is a better athlete. He is a better receiving tight end than Kyle Rudolph. And I like Kyle Rudolph, so it's nothing against him. But Irv Smith Jr., everyone talks about who's going to replace Stephon Diggs. Well, they drafted Justin Jefferson. He's going to be the guy. Irv Smith Jr. is a guy that could go out to the slot and play in the slot quite a bit. He could play on the line like a traditional tight end. He could be the guy that absorbs a majority of those targets that were going to Stephon Diggs last year. So keep an eye on Irv Smith Jr. He is a true receiving threat. Mohamed Sanu was a little banged up last year, and he had that trade in the middle of the year to the Patriots. It's not always easy for wide receivers to be traded in the middle of the season and go to teams and just perform right away. So with Mohamed Sanu, now that he's got half a season in New England, he's got a full off season there, and they've got a new quarterback in Cam Newton, who I like more than Jarrett Stidham. I believe Mohamed Sanu could end up being the wide receiver one on that team over Julian Edelman. Julian Edelman is going to be the safer bet in that deal, but Mohamed Sanu is going to be the guy with more upside. He's always been overshadowed on his other teams. A.J. Green while he was in Cincinnati, Julio Jones while he was in Atlanta. But now he can break out and kind of be a guy that in the past has always been playing a supporter role that plays that lead role this year. Taysom Hill from the New Orleans Saints. Now, the reason I bring him up is because some fantasy platforms are allowing you to play him at tight end. If you have injuries at tight end, if you have issues at tight end, if you need to stream somebody, if you play extra flexes, whatever it may be with deeper rosters, Taysom Hill can score touchdowns every single week. If you were to play him at tight end because you're having issues, maybe in a deeper league or whatever it may be, and he scores a touchdown, that right there is a positive return on value. It all depends on your league settings. It all depends on what platform you play on. Taysom Hill can be used as a tight end in some leagues this year. Golden Tate, New York Giants. I don't know why people have forgotten about him. He is, in my opinion, the best wide receiver on that team. Okay? No offense to anybody else, but he's got the numbers to back it up. He's a great route runner. He catches a ton of passes. Volume was always there for him. He's going to be working in the slot. Give me some Golden Tate this year. And just like the next guy, Jamison Crowder, both of them could probably be looked at by their young quarterbacks quite often. Jamison Crowder was a big target for Sam Darnold last year. They've got a new wide receiver in Rashard Perriman on the outside, a rookie wide receiver in Denzel Mims on the outside. Jamison Crowder could be that number one target for Sam Darnold this year, and he is a guy in PPR leagues that could rack up a ton of points based on catches. Jalen Reagor from the Philadelphia Eagles, my number 2 wide receiver in last year's draft and my rookie wide receiver 1 for 2020 in terms of fantasy points. This is a guy that is going to eat in Philadelphia. If you believe in the Philadelphia offense at all, then you have to believe in Jalen Reagor because he is going to be a huge part of that. People complain about his ability to separate. I don't see it. I don't care about it. The dude is gold. He is a great route runner. He is a dynamic athlete. He is fast. He is exactly the type of playmaker they needed there in Philadelphia. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Eric Ebron, could make his value this year solely based on touchdowns alone. Yeah, they still have Vance McDonald there, but if Ben Roethlisberger has trouble pushing the ball down the field this year because he's coming back from that elbow injury, and they do look at some of those more intermediate routes, then Eric Ebron could be a guy that mismatches in the center of the field, and that could have some of that touchdown upside on a weekly basis. Jerick McKinnon, they paid him a lot of money to come to San Francisco and just be hurt for 2 straight years. If they can get him on the field this year, I anticipate them trying to use him as much as they can. They want to get something from their money, right? They've kept him this long. They must still like him. I can't imagine that they would sign him and then keep him all this time and then not use him at all. If there is an injury in any way, shape, or form to the other guys on the roster, the other running backs that could see lots of touches, Jerick McKinnon is a guy that could see an increased workload as the year goes on. His big contribution could be in the passing game. That is where I'm looking positively for Jerick McKinnon to give us some PPR fantasy points later on. Yeah, we've got Carlos Hyde there. Yeah, we've got Chris Carson, but I'm also going to keep an eye on DeeJay Dallas. If anything happens with Chris Carson, if he isn't able to get himself completely healthy before the beginning of the season, if he's super ineffective, then DeeJay Dallas is the guy that I will keep an eye on because with Carlos Hyde, his value's always been solely based on volume. The more volume you give him, the better he is. If he's splitting touches, he's not nearly as good. If DeeJay Dallas can come in and be a better playmaker than what Carlos Hyde would be, maybe they give DeeJay Dallas, as the season goes on, more and more touches. Tampa Bay, O.J. Howard. I'm not saying go draft O.J. Howard this year. I am not nearly as high on O.J. Howard as I was last year. But keep in mind the tight end one on their team right now, Rob Gronkowski, didn't play football at all last year. The last time we saw him, he had a ton of injuries. He's coming into a new offense now. Yeah, he's got Tom Brady. However, is he the same receiving threat that we've seen in years past? If for some reason Gronk has to miss time, O.J. Howard, he is now the tight end one on that team, and he is a guy that could be in line for some pretty good volume throughout the season. Again, we're not drafting him, but if anything happens to Gronkowski, we're going to go to the waiver wire and grab Howard. Corey Davis. Now he doesn't have to be the wide receiver 1 on that team. He can be the wide receiver 2. Jonnu Smith. Maybe he steps up this year and becomes a big-time playmaker. Newsflash. We think he does here at the Fantasy Headliners. So if that happens, And you've got Derrick Henry running the football efficiently, putting up monster yards. You got Jonnu Smith and A.J. Brown, who are big playmakers. Corey Davis at this point all of a sudden becomes probably the third guy to keep an eye on that offense. And if it happens, and he shows some of that capabilities that we saw when he was coming out of the draft, now he becomes a guy for Ryan Tannehill that maybe they play him in the slot a little bit more. Maybe they keep him more on some of those short to intermediate routes. If they do, Ryan Tannehill could look his way a little bit more often, because even though A.J. Brown made a living going on the deep ball last year, Ryan Tannehill was super efficient but was not good throwing the ball down the field. And it worries me. It worries me with Ryan Tannehill that they didn't go down the field that often last year, but he was highly successful in passer rating when he did. His total yards down the field, his completions down the field, and his attempts down the field, they were 25th or lower in the NFL. So those short to intermediate routes are the things that I'm keeping an eye on, and that's why Corey Davis is a guy that could end up finally having that breakout season. And last but not least, my man Steven Sims Jr. I can't say too much about him right now, though, because he's in our draft guide, and he's one of the players that I cover in depth on why you should own him this season. So Steven Sims Jr., I'm still keeping an eye on him. Get your draft guide for $19.99 at thefantasyheadliners.com, and you can see exactly why Steven Sims Jr. is a breakout candidate for me here in 2020. Well, there you have it, Headliner Nation. 32 teams, 32 players, guys that you should be keeping your eye on this season. Now, again, we're not drafting all of these guys right away. We are just keeping our eye on them and potentially adding them at some point this season. Now, do me a favor. If you enjoy that content, go down below. Number one, hit that like button for me. Number two, leave me a comment. What are some undervalued players that you're keeping on your radar this year that you think your league mates don't know anything about? Let me know in those comments below. And then also, if you're new to the Fantasy Headliners, like I said at the beginning of the video, hit that subscribe button. Stick around for some more awesome content. We've got great stuff to come here on the Fantasy Headliners. I appreciate you all out there in Headliner Nation. Stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.